Can you hear me now? Sometimes my sound, yeah, maybe now is better. The sound should be okay, usually. No sound, this is strange. It should be working. Okay, maybe now should be okay with the sound, I think. You should hear me. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so we have exactly 10 p.m. my time. I am currently living in Greece. So let's go. We start with the rook and games, basic rook and games, very, very important topic. And we're gonna start first with an h pawn. And of course the h pawn is usually not a very dangerous one. So we are starting with a most simple position, the h pawn. And we have to know what is the way to defend first against the h pawn. Then we're gonna take a look with the g pawn, with the f pawn. With the f pawn, as you know, it's getting already very tricky. With the e pawn, it's getting to very, very complex positions. So let us start with the h pawn. So we have the current position. Of course, in case you defend against the h pawn, what is important? It is very important to have your king. So you see your king here on h7, yeah? So the king is nicely placed on h7, perfect position for the black king. The rook of the side that defends should be, of course, on the 7th rank or on the 8th rank. It's still okay, yeah? Usually it is very dangerous to defend on the 8th rank, on the last one. But against an h pawn, it is still okay. And we are trying to defend these positions as black in a passive way. So we are not trying to do something active. We are just keeping the position stable. So basically, let us give it a try. So with white, in case we go somewhere. With black, we just keep the rook on the 7th rank. So we just move with the rook on the 7th rank. And basically, there is no way for white to win this position. So let us give it some tries. Let's say rook d5. We want to get the king to g5. Yeah, very nice. White is advancing. We are still keep on waiting on the 7th rank. Yeah, very, very important. Just be calm. Nothing is gonna happen. White is getting the king to g5. Of course, we can give now a check on g7. But usually, in case you defend, it is better to have a strategy and not defend something in let's say 2-3 different defenses to mix up all the strategies. This is not a good way. So we just keep on waiting with the rook on the 7th rank. Okay, with white, what should be the plan or could be the plan? Maybe to play h6. So we keep on waiting. King goes to h5. We keep on waiting. And basically white is hopeless. You can do nothing with the white pieces. There is no way to advance. So in case we play rook g5 with the idea of check on g7, of course, black just keeps on waiting on the 7th rank. So as you can see, the position is quite easily to defend. You just keep on waiting on the 7th rank. It is important, yeah, just to remember, once again, don't try to play rook a1, rook h1 check. It is possible as well. But it is much more easier just to defend on the 7th. Just go directly to the 7th rank. Just keep on waiting on the 7th rank. Of course, we can still defend on the 8th. So, for example, in case white goes somewhere, we can still go to the 8th. It is okay, even with the king on h8, because still there is no white, no way for white to win this position. But generally, we don't want to go to the last rank. It is always very dangerous to keep the king on the last rank, so we defend on the 7th. Yeah, very nice. We just keep on waiting. There is, I mean, basically nothing that white can do to win this position. Okay, let us now take a look at a little bit more complex endgame, and it is with a g pawn. So let me set it up. We go to study. create study. Okay, Arkadij Naiditsch, and we put clear position. So let me set it up for you. Let's say we start with a fourth ring. We have the king, we have the rook, and there is the white rook, let's say somewhere on d4. Okay, now we have the second position, and it is already much more tricky to defend against the g-pawn. Still it is a draw, and still it is not a very complex draw. Yeah, thank you very much first of all for the comments. Thank you. I hope you will enjoy the little lecture on the rook endgames, and yeah, I am pleased for the nice comments. Very nice to have you here. Okay, let us continue. So with the g-pawn, basically we have the same way of defending the position. It is a passive defense. We are just waiting with a rook on the 6th or on the 7th. So I personally prefer to be always on the 7th because it is very safe, and usually we have positions where we are on the 7th rank. On the 8th it's getting always tricky. This you have to remember, don't go to the last ring. So let's say we will try to defend the same way on the 7th ring. So let's say white goes somewhere, we are just moving the king to g7. King is quite safe on g7, all is okay. King goes forward, rook to b7. And now the next step, g5. As an example, the move g5. So we keep on waiting, so we know already this strategy, but this strategy is only working for the h-pawn and for the g-pawn. We have to remember, with the f-pawn, a lot of things are gonna change. So with the h-pawn and with the g-pawn, we just keep the simple defense, yeah, simple passive defense on the 7th rank. And basically, yeah, there is not much that white can do. There is no way for white to give a check to the black king. We can try, let's say, with a rook on c6. So we give a check. King, of course, stays very safe on h7. We give another check. There is king to g7. And as you can see, for white, it is now almost impossible to find a way to advance. Very, very difficult, yeah. So the game is a draw. We can go somewhere. So black just keeps on waiting. We know already that we have to keep the 7th rank with the rook. Now, there is one tricky position which we have to learn. Let's say, like an example, black goes, or white goes somewhere. We have the rook on a1, and we have this sort of position. And now what we have to remember, it is quite important. In such positions, it does not really matter if the white king is on h5, f5. What is important is to understand the idea of defense. It is a very crucial position. We have still several ways of defending here, but the best way is just to play rook a6. So as you can see, we cut the white king. For us, it's extremely important that first the white pawn moves to g6, and only after g6 we go back to a1. So what do we want? With a rook on a1, we want now to give the checks to the white king. As you can see, rook h1 check. So in case king h6, we have the check on h1, and the king has to go back on g5. So we keep on checking, and the position is a draw. Now, why we have to be so careful with the move rook to a6? Yeah, very strong, important to remember. In case we are not careful with a move rook to a6, let's say we go to the 8th ring. Now, what is the idea of white? We can play king to h6, and as you can see now, in case we give a check, there is g6, and we are late to go with a rook on a1 because we have the rook b8 with a mate. Yes, Philidor position, exactly. But it is very, very crucial to remember this, yeah? So, in case of such structure, first we play rook to a6, so we sort of provoke the white pawn to advance, and only in case white pawn advances, we are going back to a1, and we want to give a lot of checks. Now, there is a little, of course, advantage for black, that still with a g-pawn, it is enough to wait on the 8th ring. It is still a draw in case we just play rook a8. in case white goes, let's say, king to h6, we just can keep on waiting, and we can continue keep on waiting, and there is no way to win this position for white. But with the f-pawn, as you will see very soon, we're gonna check the positions with the f-pawn, and with the f-pawn it is already a lost position. So once again, you must be extremely careful in case you want to defend on the last ring. Usually it is a bad idea to keep the king on the last ring. Still, with the pawns on h file and on the g file, we are having a draw. So it is a draw. It is a draw, but once again, it is a tricky draw. We must be very, very careful defending on the last ring. Yeah, it is basically on the limit. Why is it a draw? Because there is no way for white to advance, so white can still give a couple of checks, but basically there is nothing more than giving checks on the 7th ring. So yeah, we are having a draw once again. What do we remember? With the h-pawn and with the g-pawn, usually it is a draw. Yeah, it is quite an easy draw. As you can see, it is not too hard to defend this position, but still better to keep the king on the 7th ring, and of course your rook on the 7th ring. Even if you are on the last ring, still position is a draw. So now let us try to defend against the f-pawn, and of course f-pawn is already a very dangerous one, and then we're gonna move the pawn as well to the e file on e and d. It is getting so tricky to find a defense. So let us first try with the f-pawn. Let us set up the position. Okay, board editor, study, create a study. Okay, now we go to the position with the f-pawn, and you will see how tricky it is to defend against the f-pawn. Okay, okay, let's say we're on the 7th ring. Okay, now welcome to the position with the f-pawn, and this is really, really a tricky thing, yeah, to defend such position. Let's say it is white to move. So in case we're white to move, what do you think should be the right approach? And I believe, as you've been listening to the g-pawn position, now you can see what is the right approach for white to give it a try to win this position. The right approach is, of course, we play first king to g5. As we know, in case black is checking now on a5, we have this move f5, so we are protecting the king. So it is very important, king g5. Of course, in case we play f5, which is a mistake, after f5, black has the option of playing rook to a1, and now are coming the checks from behind. So this position would be more or less a simple draw. There is no way, yeah, that white can advance. We have the check on g1, and yeah, as we can see, check, 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 and it is a draw. So we start, of course, with the move king to g5. In case of check on a5, we have this opportunity of playing f5. So let us first take a look what would happen in case black is trying the passive defense. It is not the best way now to defend passively, but it is still possible. So let us take a look at this passive defense. Let's say black keeps on waiting. We are coming with the move f5. Black keeps on waiting. And now, as you can see, white has the opportunity of playing rook to h4. So we want to get to h7. It is very, very tricky with a f-pawn. This is what I've been telling you about. So after rook to h4, we have this very unpleasant check on h7. And as we can remember, the idea of defense, it was to play rook to a6. Yeah, this is the same idea as we watched with the g-pawn. Let us check in case black would defend passively. So let's say passive defense by black. Rook to a8. Now black is trying to keep the things calm on the 8th rank. It was still possible with a g and h-pawn. It was a draw. But right now, white has excellent chances of winning. Still, we have a draw after rook a6. But in case we are not aware of this move, rook to a6, and we just keep on waiting, so the white king is coming to g6. Pawn is coming to f6. Black still keeps on waiting, And now there is a nice way of winning for white. I give you a little time to find it maybe by yourself, because I think it is a very beautiful win. Can you see the win for white? Okay, maybe some of you already got it. And the way to win this position for white, we give first the check on g7. Now, it does not really matter king f8 or king to h8. It would end up basically in the same. In case king to h8, we have the check on h7, king to g8, and we have the check f7. King has to go to f8, and now we're checking on h8, and of course we're taking the rook of black. So white is winning. And in case in this position black is going to f8, basically we are doing the same. So we are playing rook to h7, king to g8, because it is a must. In case no king g8, of course, there is rook h8 with a mate. So now king to g8, we have the same idea of playing f7 and rook h8. So as you can see, there is no way for black to defend passively against the f-pawn. Yeah, it is already very, very tricky to defend against the f-pawn. And still there is the defense, and the defense is to play in such positions the move of rook to a6. This is what we have to remember. We have to provoke white first to move the pawn. So not first the king, first the pawn. It is very important. So, and only after the move f6, we are playing rook a1. And here are the checks. The checks are coming on g1, f1, and so on. So again, the position is just a draw. In case of king g6, rook g1 check, rook f1 check, rook e1 check, and so on. So this is what we really must remember. We must remember that this move, rook a6, it is an absolute must against the f-pawn. Yeah. In case we are not aware of rook a6, it is getting very, very tough to defend. So rook a6 idea, this is what we really have to know. So in case white is checking, white is going somewhere with the rook, let's say on b7. So what should be the next move of black? Of course, we just keep on waiting, playing rook to c6. So we are waiting for the move f6. In case there is no, in case white does not play f6, let's say white keeps on waiting, we are keep on waiting as well. So we're waiting with the rook on the 6th rank, and only after the move f6, we are going to play rook to b1, and after king g6, as usual, the check on g1. So, a nice defense. And of course, we know as well now what are the winning chances of white in case black does not manage to get this rook a6 move, which is already an absolute must to know. Okay, let us take a look now at a more complex position. We still stay with the f-pawn because the f-pawn is a tricky one. Let us take a look now. We go to the next and we create a new study. Okay, and it is getting now even more complex. So let's see. Let me put the pieces correctly. Let's say we have the black rook here, and let's say the white rook is on a7 and it is black to play. So this is one of the key positions, yeah, and this is something that even some of the very strong players still do mistaken, yeah. So we are getting already to quite some level, but it is one of the basic positions, and it is very, very important to understand how do we hold such endgames, or where is the best chance of holding this endgames. Once again, this is already quite a high level, so please pay full attention. In case you understand this sort of things once, you will never forget it, and basically you will be already quite an expert in the rook endgames, in the basic rook endgames. So we are having this sort of position. Now think about, we are having couple of different ways of defending this position for black. It is black to move. So we have the move rook to b6. It is a check. We can go directly to b8 and we can give a check on g1. So basically there are no other ways to continue. What do you think? What do you think should be the right defense? Or maybe we should just keep on running with our king to e8. Of course, it is still possible to go king to e8. I let you guess a little bit. What should be the right way of defense? And once again, it is a very, very crucial position because we see so many mistakes in this kind of positions. And me, myself, when I've been a kid, I've been taught all these rook and games, and it is really, really important to understand. You understand them once, you remember them forever. So it is black to move. And what is your suggestion? What do you think should be the right approach now? And okay, let us think logically. From the last endgame that we saw, can rook b6 or rook b8 be the right approach? And of course, it cannot. We saw that in case of rook b6 check, f6, there is rook a8 mate coming. We have to play now rook b8 to avoid mate on the last ring. And of course, white is playing rook h7, so we already know these ideas. Rook to h7, king to g8, there is f7 check, and rook h8, white is winning. So it is very, very important to remember, against the f-pawn, there is no way to defend passively on the last ring. Yeah, once again, I see your comments. Very, very important to remember, no passive defense against the f-pawn. So we must go rook g1 check. White king is going to f6. So of course f6, and we have to decide. We play king to g8 or do we play king to e8? The next very, very important decision, how do we hold such positions, king g8 or king to e8? What do you think? Okay, so let's see what should be the move. We have one rule. We have one rule which we must remember. It is a very simple rule. With the king, we have to go direction which is short from the pawn. As shorter as better. And with the rook, we have to go direction which is far away from the pawn. This is the best way to defend, and it does not really matter if we have the pawn on f, we have the pawn on e, d, c, not important. We basically defend with the same idea. So of course, king to g8 is the right solution. Very nice to see that most of you got it right. Perfect. Very nice. Yeah, we go to the short side. We go to the short side with the black king. So in case white is giving a check on a8, we of course go king h7. In case white is playing king to f7 with the idea of playing f6 next, we go just rook b1. So rook from the long side and king is on the short side. It is a draw. It is a draw. Still, there is a lot of room for mistakes. White can keep on trying to win this position, but objectively it is a draw. And basically the thing which we need to remember is that king should be short side and the rook of course should go the long side. Very, very, very important. This is why as well we give the first check on g1, basically to get our king through g8 to h7. This is a key. This is a key moment. Why rook g1? Because we want to get the king to h7, king short side, and then we get back rook to the long side. Very, very important position to remember. And yeah, guys, I think this sort of knowledge will bring you a lot of points, basically, especially in blitz games and rapid games where there is a very, very little amount of time and you have to act fast. Yeah, it should be just done automatically. King to the short side, we have the rook on the long side. This is what we have to remember, so we play the move basically instantly. Okay, so this is about the f-pawn. As you can see, there is plenty of space to go wrong in case you defend against the f-pawn. But I think now you should be able to hold a draw, I guess. In case you do remember, there's a couple of things which I showed you right now. I think it should be enough to defend against the f-pawn. So we still do remember this trick. Yeah, in case white king, let's say, would be on g5, we play rook b6, yeah, to control, to provoke f6, and then we go back. And in case the white king is already on g6, we have to go with the black king to the short side, and then we go back with the rook on the long side. And yeah, this is basically what you have to know about the f-pawn. And now we're gonna check a position which is already with the e-pawn. So with the e-pawn, it's getting even more tricky, and already a lot of positions are basically winning for the stronger side. So e-pawn is really a dangerous pawn. So let us set up a position with the e-pawn. Okay, let's go to the next study. Let's say we have a position with the e-pawn. Let me set up some random position. Let's say we have the rook somewhere on c1 and it is black to play. Okay, so now we are going to check the positions with the e-pawn, and as I said before, it is really tricky now with the e-pawn. Still, in case you are black and it is black to move now, what do you think should be the move for black? It is basically something that we are doing automatically. So what do you think? What do you think should be the move of black in this position? Maybe you can find the right decision. Yes, okay. So let's see what you're thinking. Rook c6, yeah, rook c6. Perfect. In case you are black, you are playing rook c6. Indeed. It is clearly the best. It is clearly the best move to play now. Rook to c6, as we know. We have to provoke white in playing e6. First the pawn, and only after e6 we are going back to c1, and now are coming the checks. Yeah, so king f6, we defend with a check on f1, we defend with a check on e1, and so on. We give a checks on d1. So the position is basically a draw. Okay. Let us now take a look at the position. In case black missed the move rook to c6 and black played rook f1 check, king to e6. Now the things are getting very scary, yeah? Because basically there is a mate on b8 and we have to do something. We have to do something with black now. How do we defend with black? Now, what do you think? Black to move. Black to move. Still we are able to make a draw here. So, what do you think should be the right way of trying to make a draw in this position? Yeah, perfect, guys. Perfect, guys. It is indeed. Yeah, indeed. It is the move king to f8. Perfect guess. So, we still keep the same strategy. King goes to the short side and the rook goes to the long side. Exactly, yeah, we keep the same strategy. So king f8 is very important in case we move king to d8. White would just check on b8 and we are in big trouble. Big trouble. Still, even here, there is another defense for black. It is to play rook e1, but this is already very complex. So we are not gonna take a look at the moment at the defense of rook to e1 because we want to learn the basics. And of course, king f8 is an absolute must. Okay, now let's say white is giving a check on b8. King goes to g7, and white is trying to go forward with a e-pawn. What do you think should be now the right way to defend for black? And I make it even more difficult for you. Let's say we have rook on h1. I'm just setting up a random position. So we have rook on h1 and we have the rook on c8. And now is the question, what do you think? Should we go to b1 or should we go to a1? A very, very important moment, because rook b1, rook a1 both is looking possible, but actually there is just one right choice. So what do you think? Yeah, exactly. Very good, very good. You know, this sort of position's excellent. Of course, we go with the rook to a1. So this is what we have to remember. The rook has to go as far as possible from the pawn. So we have these checks, we have the side checks. We must have the side checks. In case we do not have the checks, the position might be just lost. Yeah. So very, very important. Rook to a1. Now, after rook e1, let us take a look at one interesting position. And it is in case white is getting with a king to e7. Of course, we have the check. But let's say in case we just keep on waiting. So I am just setting up the next position. Rook to b7. So what do you think? What is the right way of holding a draw in such a position? And let's play rook to a8 maybe. Yeah, so there is no check with king to e8. So in this sort of position is basically a draw. Yeah, this is a draw. It looks already extremely dangerous, and of course it is extremely dangerous. But yeah, there is a big chance for black still making the draw. So let us first take a look at the defense in case white goes rook b1. So we first try to structure. The defense. After rook b1, the defense is always to give checks. Yeah, so we give a check on a7. In case white king goes to d6, we give a check on a6. White king goes to d7. Okay, we continue with the checks. Rook a7 check. And as you can see, the moment the white king goes to c6, we are having the opportunity to get the black king closer. And of course, it is just a draw. So not much to be done about it. This is just a draw. Okay, very nice. And let us take a look. Why is it important to have the rook on the a file? Let's say we would have... in this position, our rook would be on b file and the white rook would be on a file. What does make the difference? And the difference, just check it out. In case we give now the check on b7, there is king to d6, check on b6, king to d7, check on b7. White is just going with the king to c6. So the rook is under attack, and yeah, black is already in trouble. In case we play rook to e7, there is king d6. Once again, the rook is under attack, and of course after king f6, there is a check on f1. Still, this sort of positions are extremely complex, and sometimes it's difficult to say, is it a winning position, is it a draw? But what we have to remember are the basics. Yeah, basics is something that we should never forget. So one thing we remember: king should be on the short side to the white pawn, and rook should be as far away as possible from the e-pawn. So the best situation, of course, is in case we have the rook on the a file. Yeah, because we have more space. We have more space to give the checks, and there are so many tricky situations in this sort of position. So for example, in case I make a little example, so this position is a draw, but for example, in case the white rook is on the a file, so already this position is a win for white. So you see how close it is with a rook on the b file. already black is losing, so the position is really tricky. But generally what we have to remember is we have to put the king on the short side in case we defend, and the rook should be on the a file, so as far as possible, yeah, from the pawn. Today we are going just to check the basics. Maybe tomorrow, in case we do one more endgame session, I'm going to show you how to win this position with white, and as well how to defend the position in case the white rook is on b7 and the rook is on e8. Still, it is a tricky position to defend, not so easy, not easy at all, yeah. This is what we're gonna check maybe tomorrow. Today we are not going into this sort of positions because this is something really hard, and we need a lot of time to understand the small differences. What we are going to check today, how to defend, for example, against the g-pawn in case your king is cutted. So let us go to the next position. From the basics, basically that's it. So we know against the h-pawn and against the g-pawn there is basically an easy defense, yeah, we're just keep on waiting on the 7th rank, and there is not much white can do. With the f-pawn we must be already very careful, so we know this idea of cutting on the 6th rank. We are waiting for the pawn to go forward, and then we go back with the rook on a1 and we start to give the checks. And with the e-pawn basically it is the same. And we know already the position that we see right now. Pawn on e6, king on e7, we know the rook on a8, it is a draw. And in case the black rook is on the b file, we know it is already a win for white, so it is pretty close. Okay, so let us check now couple of positions with the h-pawn, with the g-pawn, but we're gonna check a bit more closer the positions with the pawn on the 7th rank. Really tricky. We have to focus once again because there are still pretty many tricky positions. So let us start with the h-pawn, then with the g-pawn, and once again with the e-pawn we're gonna check maybe tomorrow because these sort of things are very complex. We need a lot of time to understand this small difference. Okay, let us try with the h-pawn now. Board editor, and we're gonna check the positions. Just a second. Clear board. So let's see. Oh, sorry. Why this pawn doesn't want to disappear? No. Okay, got it. King to h8. Let's say rook on g1, and we put the black king somewhere, let's say c7, and the white rook, let's say somewhere b1. Okay, white to move, all is okay. So another very important position, of course I put the wrong rook square. Let's say white rook is somewhere on b2, of course, otherwise white would just take the rook. This sort of positions also hard to estimate. Is it a winning position or is it a draw? The crucial thing is where is standing now the black king. It is all about the black king. In case the black king manages to get to the e file, it is already a draw, because we have to understand what is the winning idea of white. What white really wants, and there is just one winning idea for white. It is to get the rook to g7 or g8. Usually it is a square on g8 because we don't have enough time to get the rook to g7. So it is to get the rook to g8. Black rook will have to move from g1, and then the white king getting to g7. So the white king is getting out, and we have the h8 queen. So let us start maybe with a position in case the black king is already very close. So let's say the black king is already on e7. The white rook is cutting the black king on the f file. This position is a draw. There is no way to win this position for white, and the right strategy for black is here as well, pretty similar. all black needs to do is keep on waiting on the G file. So we keep on waiting. You see the white king is in the corner. There is no way to get the king out of h8. Still, white is trying something. Let's say rook to a2. We, of course, try to keep the black king as close as possible. In case there is a check, we just play king to f7. In case rook g8, so finally white manages to get the rook to g8, and still there is no chance of winning this position whatsoever. Black can just play somewhere. It is not very important where to play with the rook, let's say on h3. So yeah, rook h3, there is a check on g7, king to f8, and as you can see, white has no chances of getting the king out from h8. Let's say rook g1 with the idea of check on f1. Of course, we can just play rook to f3, so we do avoid this check on f1. And in case white rook is going somewhere on a1 to give us a new check, we still can play rook g3. So we're back to basics. Back to basics, and we keep on waiting on the G file. And once again, the position is just a draw. There is nothing, really nothing that white can do. So let us go back. Let us go back to the starting position. And as we can see, in this position, the black king is still quite far away. So white has enough time to play rook b8 and rook g8. So we should immediately, of course, go for rook b8, rook g8. In case we try to play rook b7, which could be as well a nice idea to give a check on b7, king to e8. Of course, with black, we're not going to e6 because there is rook g7 coming. Very, very dangerous, yeah. So we are getting the king to e8, and as we know already, there is just one move missing, king to f8, and the position is a draw. So white is giving his best with rook to g7, and after rook g7 there is still a defense. There is just one defense for black. White wants to play king g8, so we can still find a draw, and it is by playing rook to f1 and rook f8, and it is even possible to win this position in case white goes king g8. Of course, we're just mating the white king on f8 and the game is done. So we have to remember that the best chance for white, it is to play rook to b8 and rook to g8. So very important not to try rook b7. This is definitely not something that you want to try in your games. Rook g7, rook f1, and king g8 is not possible. There is rook f8 mate. And of course, in case white gives a check on g8, it is too late. King f7, we know already this position is just a draw. Okay, so what is the winning way? And we have this move, rook to b8. So we're getting the rook to g8. And now there is several defense for black. Black can play king to e7, and black can play as well king to e6, and we're gonna see the difference. So let us start with maybe king to e7. With white, rook g8, of course. So the rook has to move somewhere from g1. Let's say the rook goes h1. King is coming out. h8. So we have to check. King goes to h6. h8 is the threat. So there is nothing else than to play rook to h1. Now king to g6. h8 still the threat. We have to give another check on g1, and king is running out over f5 square. And of course, white is winning h8 next. So now we have the defense with the king to e6, and actually it is a very, very tricky defense after king to e6. The things are still far from easy. So king to e6. Now we have rook g8, it is a must. And after rook to g8, let's say we play rook to h1, we want to get the king to f7, so the white king has to run. h8 is a threat. Now we give a check on g1, and white has to play king to f8. There is no more king to h6 because we have this check on h1, and after king to g6 we continue checking. There is no more king f5, so basically nowhere to go for the white king. King to h6, we continue checking on h1, and yeah, the white king is obliged to follow the route to f8. Let us take a look what is happening after king f8. After king f8, it looks like completely hopeless position for black, but still there are some chances, and we can give a check on f1 first. Important to remember this defense. Still black is losing, but it makes a lot of trouble. So we have this rook to f1 check, king e8, and here comes the great defense. Rook to a1, very beautiful. We want to give a mate on a8, so in case of h8 queen we have the mate on a8, and there is just one way to win this sort of position for white. It is a beautiful way, and it is to play rook to g6 check, and soon we're gonna see why rook g6 is actually so important. Rook g6 is the only way to win this position for white. In case we start to run with a king, king to d8, there is a check on a8, there is a check on a7, and yeah, we're getting the h7 pawn, and it is already draw. King b6, rook take h7. So we are obliged to give a check on g6, and depending where the black king is going from here, let's say king to f5 as well, there is an opportunity of playing king to d5. Yeah, we still have this very unpleasant check on a8, but of course king d5, I guess most of you guys, you do feel the black king is just too far away to hold to a draw. The position is of course winning for white. There are even several ways to win this position. I think the most simple one is just to play rook to h6. We want to promote next. In case of check on a8, we just go king f7, h8, still a threat, and in case of check we are running away from checks, and there is h8 queen coming. So yeah, the position is a win. This is why black is trying to hold with king to f5, and now the things are much more trickier. The rook is still hanging on g6, yeah, and there is no easy win. I give you a little time to find the solution. What should be the solution for white? How to win this position? There is no easy way of winning. You have to find the right path. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Perfect. Most of you guess it right, and it is to play rook to f6 check. Yeah, what a nice move. Rook f6 check. So the idea is, of course, in case king take f6, we have this h8 queen with a check. There is no time for black to get rook to a8. Beautiful idea of playing rook to f6. In case we take a look, there is rook d6 as well. But in case of rook d6, a very nice defense. Now the black rook is getting to h1 and wants to get the pawn on h7. For white, there is just one way to defend the pawn. It is by playing rook to d7. Now we have this king g6 and rook take to h7 coming next. So yeah, it is a draw. It is just a draw. Rook f6, what a beautiful way of winning such a position. And yeah, there is already no escape left for black. We, in case, okay, we have king e5, we have king to g5. So let's say king to g5. At the moment, we still cannot play h8 queen because there is this check on a8, but we have a nice winning idea. So what do you think can be the winning idea right now? Rook h6. No, it is not rook h6. Rook f8. Yeah, perfect. Rook f8 indeed, yeah. Very nice. Rook f8, so we want to play h8 queen. And in case of a check, we go to f7. In case of a check, we go to g8. king to g6, and we have h8 queen. There is no mate on g7. Of course, the queen can just capture the rook, and the position of white is winning. So we have to remember, very nice winning, nice way of winning the position. And in case of king e5, now we must be careful, because in case we play rook f8, we're back to the position we had before. So yeah, in this position we must be careful, and we have to play now rook to h6. As you can see, it is quite a tricky position, yeah, so a lot of things to remember. But I guess in case you know the main ideas, you should be able to find it during your own game. So just move by move, depending what the opponent is playing, you keep on going. And yeah, now in case of check, king to f7. In case of check, we have this move king to g6. h8 is a deadly threat. In case of check on a6, there is king to g5, and of course now white is simply winning. So h8. Let us take a look, take a short look in case of the move king to g5, because I saw this suggestion of playing rook to h6. The problem with the rook to h6 is, of course, there is just a check, and the black king is getting the rook. So now it is even black winning. In case the black king would be on f5, it would not really matter. So for example, I just make like a test. I put the king to f5, and we still have this check on a7. There is no king to d6 because there is a check on a6 and we capture the rook. So white needs to go to d8. We give a check. White goes closer. And in case the king is on c7 already, we can just play rook h8, and we're in time. King g5, a rook h6 is hanging. Rook goes somewhere, we play king g6, followed by rook take h7, and of course the position is a draw. So very complex, yeah, as you can see. So let us start with move 1, and we have to understand the basic plans. So the basic plan for white: rook a8 followed by rook to g8. Do not make the mistake of playing rook a7 and rook g7. This is a mistake, yeah. Don't try to get your rook to g7. Very important. We go for rook a8 and we go for rook to g8. Yes, this is something that we must remember to 100%. Yes, this is something that has to stick in our memory. We should not try to do it over the 7th rank. We should go directly for the 8th rank. As well, what we should remember that in case the black king is reaching the e7 square and the white rook is still not on g8, the position is just a draw. We are too late. We are too late to get the rook to g8. There is no way. In case of rook a8, of course, the black king immediately goes to f7, and yeah, we have trouble getting out from h8. So the position is a draw. This is what we have to remember in case the black king is on f7, or even white rook is cutting the black king by the f file. It is still a draw. We just keep on waiting with rook g3. There is nothing that white can do to win the game. So yeah, the position is a draw. And in case we check the winning ways, and the winning way, of course, is to play rook b8. Yeah, now we have this double opportunity: king e7, king e6. Both, of course, is losing, but king e6 is much tougher. Rook g8. So finally, we're getting out the king from h8. The best defense for black is to give a check on g1. It is to give a check on f1, and this beautiful rook a1 move, rook a8, is a deadly threat. The only way to win for white, to give a check on g6, and this very beautiful and very important check on f6. Just imagine you are short on time, you are not aware of this beautiful idea of checking on g6 and checking on f6. I guess it would be so tough to find the right winning way. And of course, it would help you. It will help you a lot that you know that in this position, The best way to hold, to give a try to hold this is to play not king to e7, but the best way is to play king e6, yeah, because basically we want almost automatically to play king to e7, yeah, the king is closer, but now white is winning just so simple. Such a simple way, the white king is just running out and we are playing h8 next. The game is done. But in case of king to e6, of course, white is still winning, but the winning way is just so tough, yeah? In case white is not familiar with the position, I guess you might even have a chance of saving the position. Yeah, exactly, yeah. In case we take on f6, there is h8, yeah, promotion with a check. This is absolutely correct, so beautiful. Very, very beautiful win with a pawn on h file, yeah. Rook g6. Once again, we take a look at the rook f6 check. There is no king f6. We have this h8 check. Black is not in time for rook a8. And yeah, it does not really matter where the black king is moving. White is still winning the position. In case of king g5, we have to remember this rook f8 win. Some checks are coming, but yeah, black basically can do nothing against h8 queen. And in case of king to e5, now yeah, we change the direction. We do not go to f8, but we're moving to h6, and the white king is running, yeah, to g6 square. Nice, very nice, and I guess it is a very important position to remember. Okay, the next position, we are going to check the positions with a g-pawn, and the position with the g-pawn are already, yeah, getting quite tough. With the h-pawn, it is not simple. With the g-pawn, it is getting even more difficult, and of course, fe are even harder. Okay, let us take a look at the position with the g-pawn. So we set it up. Now, let's say we start with a g6 pawn, and let's say that black king is on the e file, white rook is somewhere. So now we have this sort of position, and my first question to you guys, what do you think? Is it a winning position or is it a draw? What do you think? Give it a try. It is white to play, but it does not really matter, because what we have to understand the structure of the endgames. We have to understand the fundamentals, yeah. And it is very, very crucial that you really understand the fundamentals. So, is it a win or is it just a draw? Okay. A lot of different opinions. So, one thing which we must remember, when we took a look at the positions with the f-pawn, yeah, the black king had to go to the short side and the rook had to defend on the long side. So now we have basically a reversed situation. So yeah, it is a win. It is indeed a winning position for white, and it is almost always a win in case the black king is on the long side. The black king is standing very badly, yeah? So it is a winning position. This is what we have to remember in case we have our king in front of the pawn and the enemy's king is not on the short side. The position is a win, and it does not really matter if it is white to move, black to move, green to move, not important. The position is always a win, or to 99% a win. So now let's go to the strategy of winning such positions for white. What we have to do first? First, we have to get our pawn from g6 to g7. This is like step one. So step one, to get the g6 pawn to g7. How we do it? We do it in a very simple way. We just get the king to g8. So g7 is gonna follow. There is not much black can do about it. I mean, g7 is really something that white is going to play next. So g7 is coming. It is unavoidable. So for example, black plays rook to g1. There is g7, and let's say black keeps on waiting with rook to g2. So step 1, we have the pawn on g7. What do you think should be the step 2? Should we try to get the king out somehow over h7, or maybe there is even a better way for white? Let's see. I give you a little time to find the best solution. Okay. So let us give it a try. Let us give it a try to win this position with white. And basically, we always do the same. We always win it in the same way. And the way is, first we get the rook to a1. So we want to check the black king. It is the most easy way of winning such positions. We do not really need to think a lot, and we do not need to calculate something. First, we want to give a check on e1. So, and of course, in case there is no check on e1, we have the opportunity of playing rook to h1. So usually, in case you are black, you want to defend with rook to h2. And why rook h2? For example, in case of rook a2, so black is avoiding the check on the e file, we are of course gaining some space on the h file, so there is rook to h1, and we want to play king h8 followed by the move g8. There is nothing that black can do about it. Next move is king h8 followed by g8, and the position of white is already winning, so it is a very, very simple win. The best defense for black, it is to get the rook to h2. Yeah, so there is no more rook h1. White is giving a check on e1. Now, in case black wants to defend in a tough way, black is playing king to d7. And now is the next task. I mean, we are very, very close to be winning. Yeah, but still, it is not so simple. In case we would run with a king to f7, there are checks coming, so let us give it a try. King to f7, there is a check on f2. King to g6, there is another check on g2. In case we keep on running, black keeps on checking, and yeah, basically it does not matter where the white king is going now. The black rook will return to g2. So let us make somewhere, doesn't matter, king to g4, there is directly a check on g2, g7, and pawn is getting lost. And in case of king e4, of course, still rook g2. So basically the same idea again and again. This is why we should not try to run with the king directly over f7. But maybe some of you do know what is a way of winning such a position. It is still a tricky way of winning it. And yeah, let's see who does understand the winning procedure here for white. Okay, I see a lot of different choices. Rook e4, rook e5, rook f1. Why actually rook f1? This is so strange. The black king would come closer. Yeah, we just played rook e1 to hunt the black king away. So rook f1, no. Rook f1 is not the correct way to do it. We have two choices, rook e5 and rook to e4. Perfect. These are the best moves. Rook g1. No rook g1. There is still king e7. The white king is now captured on g8. No squares. So we should not leave the e file. The e file is very important. We're cutting the black king away. So we have rook e5 or we have the rook e4. We have to decide. The idea of rook e4 or rook e5, why actually are we playing rook e5 or rook e4? The idea is the same. We're building a bridge indeed. Very nice that some of you do know how to win such positions. Perfect. So we are building a bridge. We have to decide, do we build a bridge with rook e5 or do we build a bridge with rook e4? So let us take a look. Rook e5. First, in case black is not playing king to d6, but black just keeps on waiting. So after rook e5, we want to play king to f7. There is g8 queen. So black tries to defend with a checks, as we saw before it was working, but right now it is not. So rook f1, king to g6. There is g8 queen coming. So black is giving a check on g1, and of course we do play rook to g5. We have the g8 coming next, and white wins the game. Black can do nothing about g8. So rook e5, a correct idea, yeah, of building the bridge. But in case of rook e5, there is a defense with king to d6. Very, very unpleasant defense. King to d6, and well, in case white goes king to f7, there is a check on f2. Still, the position might be winning, but of course we do not want to take to remember something that is not according to our strategy. Because in case of check on f2, we continue with the same strategy, king g6. It is not enough to win the game. Black can take the rook on e5, there is g8 queen, and we have this check on g2. And yeah, it is just a draw. So we must be very, very careful. Now, in case we play rook e3, because I see some suggestions, rook to e3. What is the threat of rook to e3? Let's say black keeps on waiting. Now we start to run. Black keeps on checking. We start to run. Black keeps on checking. We start to run. And black keeps on checking on g1. So to have rook on e3, it is not enough to win the game. This is why we have the correct solution and the right way to win this position. It is to play rook e4, but I think it is very, very logically right now why rook e4 is the right way. So in case black keeps on waiting with rook to h1, so we play king to f6. And now black is already in big trouble, because in case of check on f1, there is king to g5, check on g1, and we have this rook g4. This is why rook is standing perfectly on e4. Yeah, this is what we need to remember. We need to remember two things. We need to build a bridge to win the position, and we're building the bridge with a rook on the fourth line. Yeah. On e4. So not e5, not e3. We're building the bridge on e4. And I guess in case you remember this idea of building the bridge, this idea of having the rook on e4, after that, I guess you should be able to win your games. And as well, you know the best way of defense, yeah? Because many of your opponents might not be able to win this position. I mean, you must know that you need to build a bridge. In case you are not aware of it, you do not know it. I mean, it's really hard to find a win over the board, especially in case there is limited amount of time. So it's getting very, very tricky. Yeah, we come to this position. We have a question. In case black is playing now rook to g2, what should be the winning idea? And the winning idea is pretty simple now, because after rook g2 we have a lot of time and we can use it by playing rook to e5 now. So still we want to play rook to g5, and of course there is no defense against rook g5. So yeah, the game is just over. Let us check. King to d6, we play rook to g5. We want to play g8, and in case of check, we just go king g6. So this we know already that this is a winning position for white. Yeah, basically that's it. This is everything what you need to know about g7 pawn. I think you do remember that we need to build a bridge. You do remember that we need to put the rook on e4, and as well you do remember what is the best defense for black. Yeah, with white, first we want to go rook a1 to check the black king on the e file, and the best defense for black is to play rook to h2. Otherwise you are just losing too fast. Rook h1 is coming next, so in case black tries to avoid rook e1 checks, there is rook to h1. And now we have this king to h8 followed by g8. And of course, yeah, white is just winning. So the best defense for black is to keep the rook on the h file. And with the rook on h file, we first give the check on e. And now we know that we are ready to build the bridge. And how we build the bridge? We put the rook on the force. Very simple. I hope you will remember it forever. And yeah, it's gonna gain you a lot of points during your practical games. All right, I hope you enjoyed so far this rook and games. I think they are very important. Yeah, rook and games is something so complex. You know, even right now, in case I do play rook and games, it is so easy to go wrong. It is so easy to make a mistake sometimes, and the positions are just so complex. And even for the best players of the world, sometimes it's difficult to find the right pass because the positions are just so enormously complex. All right. So what we are going to do now? Now we are going to make a short switch to my channel. And after that, we continue with the rook and games, and we will continue with the end games, where the black king is cutted and the white king is not ahead of the pawn, because now we know in case the white king is ahead of the pawn, the positions are winning. But we're going to check the positions when the white king is actually standing not in front but behind the pawn, and these positions are once again so tricky. There are many rules which we we just need to know them, otherwise we have no chances of playing this position. So let's switch the channels. I'm going now to my channel. You can keep on staying, of course, if you like to learn some rook and games. For you it will make, I guess, not a big difference. Let me try to get my channel. All right, let's see if now we're getting to my channel. And yeah, let's us make the rate. Just a second, please. First time today. So yeah, let's see. Just a second, guys. Give me a minute of break, and then we go on with the rook and games. Okay, just a second. I cannot find myself on Twitch. Yeah, you see what can happen sometimes. Very strange. I cannot find myself. I'm a bit confused in that. Okay. Let's see if maybe now it will work. No. Somehow I cannot find myself. Sorry guys, just a minute of break, and as well I take some tea. A bit strange. Okay. Okay. I see. No joke is helping me a lot.